Hello, my dear students. Welcome once again to another session of our History e-class. In this session, we are going to learn about learning and culture. As the religious and social experiences of the Muslims deepened through their contact and interaction with different people, different communities, societies, they started reflecting upon themselves and they started questioning certain issues pertaining to God and the world around them. They started questioning and thinking what should be the ideal conduct of a Muslim, how he should behave in public, and what should be his conduct in private. He started reflecting then what is the object of creation, why man was created, and how does one know what God wants from his creatures. When all these questions came to his mind, he needed to go to somebody who was learned and who could answer his queries. For this, they went to the learned Muslim scholars. These scholars were known as ulema. And according to these scholars or ulema, ilm, that is knowledge, could be derived from the Holy Quran, which is the religious book of the Muslims, and Sunnah, which is the model behavior of Prophet Muhammad and his practices, whatever he practiced, which should be emulated by the Muslims. And he said these were the only way to know the will of God, through Quran and Sunnah, and this will provide them guidance in this world. The ulema in that time, medieval times, then started devoting themselves to writing tafsir. Now these words that I am using, they are all Arabic words. Now tafsir was interpretation and explanation. They would read the Quran and what was the exact explanation of those words, they would start writing that down. They also documented Prophet Muhammad's authentic hadith. Now hadiths are the traditions or sayings of Prophet, which include his words, what he said, the advice that he gave to the people, so that the followers of Islam, that the followers of Prophet Muhammad, would practice what was preached by Prophet Muhammad and abstain from what he forbade his followers to do. These Muslim scholars then got down to prepare a body of laws. These laws were meant to govern the relationship with God through rituals, and these rituals were called ibadat. This Islamic law called Sharia, which actually meant the straight path, guided people's relationship with all human beings and what could be their affairs, social affairs. And the term used for social affairs was muamlat. While framing these Islamic laws, the jurists or the legal experts made use of reasoning. The term for reasoning in Arabic is qiyas. They try to reason out and then try to find out the reasoning behind what was written in the scriptures. Since everything was not apparent in Quran, because times had changed, there was urbanization, life had become more complex, and Quran was written down much earlier. So in the light of the verses of the Quran and the present day, they used to get down some reasoning to find out its meaning. Sharia was adjusted to take into account customary laws of various regions. Now, the interpretation of different scholars to the Quran, the Hadith, the Sunnah, all there were slight variations and differences. And on the basis of these differences, 4 important schools of law developed: the Maliki, the Hanafi, the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali. Now these were named after leading jurists, legal experts. They were known as faqih, and the names of these 4 legal experts were for Maliki was named after Malik bin Anas. Then Hanafi was named after Abu Hanifa. Then Shafi'i was named after Al-Shafi'i, and Hanbali was named after Ahmad bin Hanbal. So these were the jurists or the faqih. The Sharia provide guidance in most legal issues, and these legal issues are mostly pertaining to social matters like marriage, divorce, inheritance. Less of it was on issues of commerce, penalty for various wrongs that people would have done, what punishment would be given for that, and constitutional matters, because these differed from place to place. But marriage, divorce, and inheritance has been clearly explained in Sharia. Then the state had appointed a Qazi. Now, Qazi is the judge who gives his verdict if there is dispute. So the work of this Qazi was basically to settle disputes rather than enforce Sharia. He was not told, you're not supposed to tell people that they are to follow Sharia. But those who were not following and did some wrong, the Qazi was to pronounce the punishment for them. Now what you see on the screen is a picture of the Holy Quran, and if you can see the script, this is the Arabic script in which it is written. Now written in Arabic, it is divided into 114 chapters which are known as surahs. One chapter is called one surah. So total of 114 surahs, and they are all arranged in descending order of length. That means the first, leaving the first, second onwards it's the largest, then smaller, and towards the end is the smallest. The only exception here is the first surah, which is a short prayer, because it begins with a short prayer. So the surah Fatiha, Al-Fatiha, is a short prayer, and then onwards is the biggest surah, and then shorter and shorter. Now Quran is a collection of messages. Now these messages are revelations, those thoughts that were revealed to Prophet Muhammad through angel Gabriel. The collection of these revelations is what is Quran for us. These revelations were compiled around 650 AD, and the oldest complete Quran which we have today dates back to the 9th century. Now another aspect of Islam is Sufism. Now the Sufis were a group of religious minded people. In medieval Islam, they tried to go into a deeper and more personal understanding of God. And their understanding and their relation with God was through asceticism. Now, asceticism is known in the Sufi language as Rahbaniya. Rahbaniya or asceticism means rejection of all the worldly pleasures and to lead a life of severe self discipline. And they thought that that is the way of attaining closeness to God. And also, besides asceticism, it was mysticism. Now, mysticism is a kind of a direct communication with the divine, with God, and this communication would transcend ordinary human knowledge. That's why people used to go to Sufi saints and ask them what is going to be their future, what should they do, because they thought that they have a direct connection with God. Sufis sought to renounce the world. They believed in renouncing all worldly pleasures, and the term for this kind of renunciation was zuhud. And they relied on God alone. Tawakkul. Tawakkul means to have an absolute faith in God, and whatever His plans were, they would happily accept whatever God had planned for them, whether good or bad. As a decision of God, it was acceptable to them. In 8th and the 9th centuries, ascetic inclinations were elevated to a higher stage of mysticism. Now, when they went on to a higher stage of mysticism, that was what is called Tasawwuf. Tasawwuf means they became a real Sufi who renounced the worldly pleasures and had a direct communication with God. And they also believed in the idea of pantheism, that means oneness of God and His creation. And they felt that the human soul must be united with its maker, that means united with God. Now, we have heard of a number of Sufi saints in our own country. If you go to Ajmer, there's a dargah of Sufi saint Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. Then in Delhi, there is Nizamuddin Aulia. His dargah is there in Nizamuddin area. Then If you go to Agra, there's the Dargah of Salim Chishti. So these are some of the common ones, but there have been many Sufi saints in our country. Now, in the Muslim world, at that point of time, medieval period, some important Sufi saints and their preachings which were followed by the people. One is Rabia, Rabia of Basra. She was a woman saint, and through her poems, she preached unity with God could be achieved through intense love for God. And this kind of extreme and intense love for God was known as Ishq. Then there was an Iranian Sufi saint by the name of Bayazid Bistami, and he was the first to teach the importance of submerging the self in God. That means they believed, the word here is fana, that means they believed in self denial and forget all the worldly pleasures and just submerge into God. And in this kind of submerging self to God, they could just forget about self and be united with the divine. Then Sufis also held musical concerts, and this was known as Sama. Sama means listening. So when these concerts took place, there were many people who witnessed these concerts, and they would listen carefully to the music, and this music was full of chantings which was in praise of God, and it would stimulate the emotions and lot of love and passion for the divine. Now, Sufism was open to all religions. It was open to people regardless of their religious affiliation, their status, or their gender. Men, women, high, low, it could all come and be part of this. Now, it was more personal than institutional, and that is why Sufism gained so much popularity, and all over the world, more and more people gathered together and paid respect to the Sufi saints and also believed in the ideology and the principle of Sufism. So much for this class. We'll continue again. Thank you so